All right, let's get to the offensive end. He's averaging under 10 points since he came. He's shooting a very, very low percentage. I can tell you that I was communicating with some people around the league last night during the game, and some of them were saying this is who he is now. Now, I don't think that necessarily we believe that, but what keeps getting brought up is the injury history. We're talking about more than 2 years since he had the quad injury, which at the time was described as worse than the typical knee injury. He acknowledged last night that he doesn't have quite the same strength in both legs. And offensively, he looks a little disjointed with the jumper. And I guess I want to get to this, and I'll start with you, Greg. The big money is made on the offensive end. I think we all agree on that. Can he get back to the level of offensive player that he was? He's going to get better with rhythm. There's no question about that. He'll be better than he's looked the first couple games. But what is the ceiling here? And I guess more so, what does the ceiling need to be for this team this year? And what does the ceiling need to be for this franchise to re-sign him?
Great questions. I don't think we're ever going to see the Oladipo we saw in his breakout year in Indy. Like, that was the peak of his, just by virtue of the fact that he had the injuries that he's had, and that burst and that quick first step and that rise to the rim, like, some of that stuff is just, it's difficult to get back to that place, but I still think he can be really effective. I think they at least need 18, 19 a game from him. I mean, I'm being vague in the way that I'm approaching the evaluation, but like, I just don't think that it's a situation where if Goran continues to decline, because that's just the nature of father time. And Hero's going to continue to ascend. So you're going to get more points in theory from him. Duncan continues to get better, but I think there is a ceiling to how many points per game Duncan Robinson can truly average. So you're going to need Depot to be that third guy, unless Hero's going to make it up there. So I'm thinking 18, 19 a game is where you got to get him.
So I'm kind of thinking something similar. I was thinking, like, speaking back to what I was talking about before, I still think of him playing a more complementary role than a main one. So I'm thinking, and especially with the way that the team has played with him in the lineup so far, it's more reminiscent of what they had last season when they were kind of splitting the difference as far as like not one or two guys having a lot of the points. There was 5 or 6 guys in double figures. I think we've seen more of that. So I'm thinking it's got to be at least 15, 16 a game, just to be generous. Like, I think he's got to be a reliable, productive offensive player, somebody who will contribute on that end. And I know he's going to give you stuff on the playmaking, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But like, as far as his actual scoring, he needs to be reliable. There's no doubt about it. And he needs to have games where he goes off, right? Like, he needs to have games where he's giving you 23, 25. Like, not that you're going to get it all the time, but he needs to show you that he's still capable of that. He needs to show you he's still capable of hitting that, the pull-ups. And like that's the thing that I'm kind of fearing a little bit. I talked about it in another episode, is that I've liked the connection he's had with Bam so far. It gives him another pick and roll attack there. They seem to have a nice connection so far that's like natural, right? They played well off each other and have found each other pretty easily. But what I'm wondering is if they can run the pick and roll together in the playoffs, and teams are just going to kind of let Vic get that pull-up jumper and just be like, oh, yeah, we'll live with those. And if he's not hitting those, I just think that's going to be something that they can, that they got to worry about a little bit. Now, what I will say is, though, and we talked about this pre-show, there's obviously only been 2 games played, Victor Oladipo on the Heat so far. And in this extremely small sample size, the Heat have the eighth best offensive rating in the league and the 5th best true shooting percentage in the league. Again, through 2 games. So it's an extremely small sample size. But I do think that having Vic there, even, as inefficient as he's been as a scorer, has helped grease the wheels of the offense. Like, I think it gives them another real playmaker, another guy people have to respect. I still think he's a good catch and shoot player, so you have to kind of guard him out there. And maybe that changes in the playoffs, but if he's being respected as a catch and shoot guy. So I think and I love what he's done as a playmaker so far. Again, not perfect, but he is a good playmaker. He's not your main point guard. He's not your main one, but I will say it's an upgrade over Kendrick Nunn. And I just think Oladipo can really get into space and do stuff and make things happen for guys like Duncan Robinson, Tyler, etc.
You mentioned Kendrick Nunn. I'm glad you did, because Kendrick has not played in the past couple of games. He's been the guy squeezed. I mean, even Gabe Vincent has gotten some minutes, right? Because Dragic was
And with
out
Goran out too, it's crazy.
a couple of games ago. But here's the one thing. I'm not going to argue with you in any way that Kendrick Nunn is a better playmaker than Victor Oladipo. He's not. But the one thing that you mentioned is, again, when Victor is given a little bit of space, is he going to knock down that shots? Because we do know the one thing that Kendrick Nunn can do, coming off those curls, getting into the mid-range, is he does make a fair percentage of those shots when he's feeling pretty good. And also as a three-point shooter, he's actually been a little better three-point shooter than Victor Oladipo this season also.
He's better at both of those things than Victor. There's no doubt about it.
Right. So I guess I'm not going to argue that is more important than the playmaking, than providing another playmaker to play, to take the burden off of Jimmy and Dragic and Bam, who do most of it. But it does hold some importance. And I just wonder, what is the line? Like if Victor is shooting in the mid 30s overall or something like that, if his struggles continue, if he can't find his rhythm, what is the line is there any line for either of you? No, Greg's shaking his head because he does this on video. There's no line for either of you where it makes more sense to give even Nunn some of those minutes.
I mean, maybe spot minutes here and there if you need because of foul trouble, circumstantial stuff. But overall, there is nothing that I think Oladipo does bad enough, or that the things he does well don't basically offset whatever he's struggling at, where I think you take him off the floor for Kendrick Nunn or Gabe Vincent, unless, it's obviously something that, extenuating circumstance, but because this is beyond the season. And I know that we're going to stay in the moment and we're going to follow this run. And that is, I think it's important to just watch this team and focus on this team, but there also is an evaluation that's going to continue to go on and we can't ignore it. And I just think that, not only are you not going to invest in Kendrick Nunn, because if he's not cracking Depot here, that's a tell, but also you got to find out what you have in Oladipo before this summer.
Yeah. For you, Alex, is there a line?
Well, the line is, like I said before, if he's just not reliable, if we're constantly having this conversation about his scoring and, again, I want to see how the sample, I want to see how the Heat's offense looks, after a larger sample of Oladipo playing there, regardless of his scoring. Because I do think, just watching it outside of the numbers, I do think their offense has looked cleaner with him on the floor. I just think it's another real threat out there. And there's no doubt about it. Kendrick Nunn is a better shooter. And when we had that conversation a while ago about, how much better than Kendrick Nunn is Oladipo, that was the one thing I was always saying was you can guarantee, it's guaranteed Kendrick Nunn is going to give you better shooting than Oladipo. I just think Oladipo is somebody who's going to get to the rim with so much ease. And, like you said, is a better playmaker, a much better defender, and is somebody who, once he gets going, has the ceiling of maybe not what he was before and almost definitely not what he was before, like Leif said, but somebody who can get to 80-90% of that. That's close to an all-star level player. And they just need to get that level, something right below a low-level all-star. I think that's the type of play he needs to give you. I don't think he needs to be an all-star level talent, but if you got to pay this guy for the next 2, 3, 4 years around 20-something mil a summer, you got to get consistent scoring from him. There's no doubt.
All right, so the last part of this we're going to deal with are the injuries themselves, and I want to focus in on that just a little bit more. But before we do, I want to tell you about one more great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that's Chase Signs and Graphics. Successful businesses and organizations require quality signs and graphics for a professional look and to entice customers. That's why people turn to Chase Signs and Graphics. With more than 15 years of experience designing, building, and installing signs, Chase Signs and Graphics are an end-to-end solution for all your signage needs, providing everything from graphic design to production to installation. They offer a variety of custom products, including building signs, banners, vehicle graphics, lobby signs, indoor signs, monument signs, and more. They'll schedule a site visit and have an estimate ready within 48 hours. And they serve all of Broward County. That's all the way from Deerfield down to Hollywood, Pines, and just north of Dade. So if you need professional signage to help your business organization stand out, call today at 954-257-1828. That's 954-257-1828, or visit Signs Broward on Twitter. All right, let's close with this, guys. we talk about long-term investment. You have an injury now that has taken more than 2 years, and he's not 100%. I mean, there's no one who argues he's 100%. In fact, there were issues in Houston after the trade. Obviously, there were issues in Indiana. There were, from what I heard, there was not great alignment in terms of his rehab in Indiana. We had Jay Malcofalgos on, if you remember, during the playoffs last year, talking about some of the disconnect that went on between the Pacers organization and Oladipo. So you have that stuff. And ultimately, this is going to be a big money decision. I mean, you're deciding, I put this up today. Drew Holiday just signed a $40 million a year extension with Milwaukee. They've locked into their big three. Brooklyn's locked into their big three. Philadelphia seems to have a semblance of a big three, right? Because they're paying Tobias Harris like a third star. The other top teams in the East, they have big threes. So the Heat need a big three, so to speak. And if it's not going to be Tyler Hero's ascension, it's going to be one of these other players. The injury situation alone, Greg, is it enough to say this is not a $30 million a year player, $25 to $30 million a year player, and maybe you're better off spending that money on a Kyle Lowry, even though he's quite a bit older?
It damn sure makes you think about that. And I think that is a tell in itself. I think that you're going into it with a little bit of, I think all Heat fans, or at least most rational ones that have followed the breadcrumbs as they've come, is that Oladipo's wanted to be in Miami and Miami has explored other options. And I just feel like this is going to be a situation where it's going to go one of two ways. One, this team is going to come together. They're going to make a great run. They're going to look awesome. It's all going to work itself out. And we're not going to ask these questions because they're going to just work out everyone's deals and we're going to be happy campers. Or they're going to look at incentive-laden contracts, things that relate back to how many games you play, how many minutes you play. Andy can get very creative with that stuff, like he did with Kelly Olynyk, like he did with Dion Waiters, with the unlikely to achieve bonuses and things like that can help with cap space. And the question will be, does Oladipo think he is such a premium player that making him an offer that has incentive-laden stuff in it is not respectful or anything like that? And if a New York Knicks team is willing to give him $28 million, then what do you do? I think they're also going to really look at a short-term contract no matter what, because they can get right back in the mix here in 2023 or something like that.
There was no expectation when he came. They made him no promise, Alex. So, I mean, this is the ultimate prove it. Like Greg said when he first came, 25 games to decide if he's a $25 million player. Do you think ultimately, I know you gave the parameters, do you think ultimately he'll prove he's a $25 million player?
Wow. Coming at me with the tough questions, huh? All right. I guess I deserve it for, bringing along this Oladipo train for so many months. I don't know. Like, I really don't know. And when you said it just now, like my first reaction was to say no. Right. But I think that's just because of like kind of the first two games, and not that I think he's going to be that inefficient. Like I've said, I think he's going to get better. But it just seems like it's a hard task for him. Now, I do think there's a really easy way for him to just kind of be a star in his role and make himself worth it. And that just means, be reliable, be great. He doesn't have to be great on offense. Be good on offense, be reliable, and keep being great on defense, and the Heat winning, right? Like if they get far and it's clear that they're better with him on, I think they can talk themselves into paying him. And look, I think Leif nailed everything he said about the offseason there. And, that's as per usual when it comes to Leif, especially with the transactional stuff. Like, I think all of that, you nailed it. It's a prove it time for Victor Oladipo. Like Ethan said, they made no promises. And it's like, well, if the Knicks or another team is willing to really pay up and the Heat just don't feel that way, like, why wouldn't they just go with another option when they know that they've had other guys there that might be more willing to come here and might be better, right? And so the Heat just have leverage in this situation, especially because they didn't have to give up anything of value, of long-term value for Victor Oladipo. So I just really think it's on him at this point to prove it. He has to prove that he's still reliable on both ends of the floor. And I'm going to say 70% chance he doesn't do it, that he doesn't become that $25 million guy. I think if I had to guess, like just the value of who he is on the court, it's going to be something around 20 million. So maybe I'm nitpicking there.
But here's the thing, Heat Nation, clear conscience, because the Bucks gave up 3 first-round picks and they're about to pay $160 million to Drew Holiday. And Miami gave up Avery Bradley and Kelly Olynyk. So at some point with this, the risk is absolutely worth the evaluation.
100%.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And to add to that, if there's any chance that Victor Oladipo can get to a Drew Holiday level, then it's a huge win. And the reality is Victor Oladipo's played in a couple All-Star games. Drew Holiday's played in one. Drew's older than Vic. I like Drew better as a player. I said that before the trades were made. I still feel that way. But Vic's capable of playing at that level. He did it, albeit for one season, but he's capable of playing at that level, and he's young enough to kind of figure it out. I think a lot of this is on him, guys, to close. I think a lot of it's on him. I think he has to – it does not appear, at least from what came out of Indiana and Houston, that he necessarily put in the time that they wanted him to put in. Remember, those are not his first 2 organizations. Orlando drafted him 2nd overall and traded him. OKC had him and packaged him with Sabonis to get Paul George. So you're talking about 4 different organizations have had Vic and decided – not in the long-term plans, okay? I mean, Houston tried with a 2-year extension, but that's as far as they would go. Vic's got to make himself part of someone's long-term plans, and this is where he wanted to be. So he's got to get with the training staff and whatever it is that they can possibly do to get that quad as healthy as it can possibly be, in addition to, kind of his attitude being in the right place. It's on him now, because and I like the position the Heat's in there. But I don't know necessarily that the offense is going to come quite the way that Heat fans were hoping. I think take the defense. There'll be like some occasional 22, 23-point games. And I think for the most part, if you can get 15, 5, and 4 from him most nights and good defense, I think you're satisfied with that. And then you put it in the Heat's court this offseason. All right, thanks to our sponsors, Miami Grill. We always mention our friends over at Seltzer Mayberg as well, Chase Signs and Graphics and all the other ones, and Prize Picks. If you're going to play, use the code 5. National championship game coming up. It should be a good one. Go to mybookie.ag, mybookie.ag. Again, use the code 5. You'll get a bonus.